He threw those divorce papers at my feet like I was trash, laughing with his mistress on speakerphone, said I'd be nothing without him. That broke housewife, she's gone. What he didn't know was that I'd been planning my exit for months. And baby, when I struck back, I took everything. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or told you weren't enough, this story is for you. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because you're about to witness the sweetest revenge you've ever heard. Trust me, you don't want to miss how this ends. Now, let me tell you how it all started. My name is Vanessa, and for 9 years I lived what everyone thought was the perfect life. Beautiful house in the suburbs, luxury cars in the driveway, a husband who looked good on paper. Brandon was a real estate developer, the kind of man who walked into rooms like he owned them. And for a long time, I believed he did. I believed in him. I believed in us. But let me tell you something about perfect lives. They're usually perfect lies. From the outside, people saw success. They saw the designer clothes, the vacation photos, the smile I wore like armor. What they didn't see was the way Brandon controlled every dollar I spent, the way he made decisions about my life without asking me, the way he'd laugh at my opinions in front of his friends, then tell me I was too sensitive when I got hurt. Little cuts, you know, the kind that don't bleed but leave scars anyway. I wasn't always this woman. Before Brandon, I was an accountant. A damn good one, too. I had my own career, my own money, my own life. But when we got married, Brandon convinced me his business needed me more than some corporate job ever would. He said we were building something together, an empire. So I gave it up. I gave up my career to manage his books, to handle his accounts, to make sure every number added up while he played the big shot developer closing deals. And I did it well. Too well, actually. That's what he didn't count on. We had a daughter, Nina. She's 7 now, beautiful and smart and everything good in this world. I threw myself into being the perfect mother while Brandon threw himself into being successful. Or at least, that's what I thought he was doing. Those late nights at the office, those weekend trips to check on properties, those phone calls he'd take in another room, I told myself it was just business. I told myself a lot of things to keep the peace. But your gut knows, doesn't it? Even when your heart doesn't want to admit it, your gut knows. I started noticing things. Receipts from restaurants we never went to, charges on the credit card for jewelry I never received, the way he'd smile at his phone and quickly put it away when I entered the room. His secretary, Simone, started coming up in conversation more and more. How smart she was, how efficient, how she really understood the business. I felt something twist in my stomach every time he said her name. One Tuesday afternoon, I found them, the text messages. His phone was charging in the kitchen, and it buzzed with a notification. I don't know what made me look, but I did. And once I started reading, I couldn't stop. Months of messages, explicit, detailed, planning a whole life together. But what hurt more than the cheating was what he said about me. He called me a burden. Dead weight, said I was a gold digger who trapped him with a pregnancy, that I contributed nothing to his success. Every insecurity I'd ever had, every moment I'd felt small, he'd turned into entertainment for her. I stood in that kitchen holding his phone, and something inside me broke. But instead of screaming, instead of confronting him, I took pictures of everything, every single message. Then I put the phone back exactly where it was and went about my day like nothing happened. Because here's what Brandon didn't know about me. Accountants don't just manage numbers. We see patterns, we plan, we execute. And I was about to execute the most important plan of my life. For 3 weeks, I played the perfect wife while I quietly gathered information. I went through 9 years of business records, files I'd organized myself, bank statements, tax returns, investor agreements, property deals. I knew where everything was because I'd put it there, and the more I looked, the more I found. Brandon wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. The real estate empire I'd helped him build. It was a house of cards made of fraud. inflated property values to secure bigger loans, fake renovation costs to skim money off the top, investor funds going into personal accounts, tax returns that were basically fiction novels. He'd been cooking the books for years, and because I was the one managing the accounts, my signature was on half of it. He'd forged the other half. If this ever came out, I'd go down with him, unless I got ahead of it first. That's when Brandon came home with the divorce papers. It was a Thursday evening. I was making dinner, and he walked in with this smug look on his face. Didn't even say hello. Just threw the papers on the kitchen table and said, "Sign these. I'm done playing house with you." Then he did something I'll never forget. He put his phone on speaker and called Simone. Right there in our kitchen, with our daughter upstairs doing homework, he put his mistress on speaker so they could both mock me together. She laughed, actually laughed, said something about how I probably couldn't even understand the legal terms without his help. Brandon added that I'd get nothing in the divorce because I'd contributed nothing to his success, that I was a glorified housewife who should be grateful he was offering any settlement at all. He gave me 48 hours to sign, or his lawyer, his golf buddy of course, would make things very ugly for me in court. He said no judge would believe I'd contributed anything real to his business. Then he walked out, leaving the papers there like trash. I stood in that kitchen and I cried. I'm not going to lie to you and pretend I was strong in that moment. I cried hard. I called my sister Rhonda, and she came over immediately. She held me while I sobbed, while I questioned everything about myself, while I wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe I was nothing without him. But then Rhonda said something that changed everything. She said, "Nessa, you're an accountant. What do accountants do best?" And I looked up at her and said, "We make things add up." That's when I dried my tears and got to work. I didn't sign those papers. Instead, I called an old colleague of mine, Troy, who'd become a forensic accountant. I sent him every file I'd copied, every document, every shred of evidence of Brandon's fraud. Troy called me back within 2 days and said, "Vanessa, this is federal. This is IRS, FBI, multi-agency level fraud. He's looking at serious prison time. That's exactly what I wanted to hear." Then I called the best divorce attorney in the city, Diane Fletcher. She was expensive, but I didn't care. I liquidated a small savings account Brandon didn't know about, money my grandmother had left me that I'd kept separate. Diane listened to my story, looked at my evidence, and smiled. She said, "Oh, honey, we're not just getting you a divorce, we're getting you justice." For the next week, I played the part. I acted defeated. I asked Brandon for small concessions in the divorce, things like keeping my car, getting a little money for Nina's school. He laughed at me, called me pathetic, said watching me beg was almost sad. He was so busy celebrating his victory and planning his new life with Simone that he didn't notice what was happening behind the scenes. Diane was filing motions. Troy was compiling forensic reports. I was contacting every investor Brandon had ever screwed over. I reached out to his business partner Gerald with proof that Brandon had been setting him up to take the fall for some of the shadier deals. Gerald was furious. He lawyered up immediately. Then I did something beautiful. I contacted the IRS. I sent them 9 years of tax returns with my analysis showing exactly how Brandon had been committing tax fraud. I included bank statements, offshore account information, everything. I made it so easy for them that they couldn't ignore it. I also filed a police report for identity theft and fraud because Brandon had forged my signature on multiple documents. I had handwriting experts ready to testify. I had dates and times when I wasn't even in the state, but somehow my signature appeared on contracts. The trap was set. All I had to do was spring it. On day 7, I agreed to meet Brandon at his lawyer's office to sign the papers. He walked in so confident, so smug. Simone was waiting in the car outside. He'd told me that specifically, like twisting the knife one more time. His lawyer, this good old boy named Chuck, was grinning like they'd already won. I sat down with Diane next to me and I signed the papers. Every single page. But these weren't his papers anymore. These were amended papers that Diane had filed with the court. Papers that gave me the house, full custody of Nina, and 70% of all legitimate marital assets. Brandon laughed when he saw them. He said, "You can file whatever fantasy you want. No judge is going to give you anything." That's when Diane opened her briefcase and pulled out 3 folders. She slid them across the table and said, "Your client has 24 hours before I file these with federal prosecutors." Chuck opened the first folder and his face went white. Bank fraud, tax evasion, investor fraud, identity theft. 9 years of evidence, all compiled, all documented, all ready for court. Brandon looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He said, "What did you do?" I leaned forward and said, "I did the math, baby, and it turns out you're broke." Diane explained it simply. If Brandon fought the divorce, we'd file criminal charges immediately. The IRS was already investigating. I'd made sure of that. His investors were ready to sue. His partner was ready to testify against him. But if he signed our agreement, took the settlement we offered, and cooperated with authorities, maybe, he could avoid some prison time. He had 24 hours to decide. He tried to call Simone from the parking lot. I watched from the window. She didn't answer. By the time we got home, the news was already breaking. Local reporters had gotten wind of the investigation. Real estate developer under federal investigation for fraud. It was all over the news by dinner time. Brandon's phone was ringing off the hook. Investors, partners, friends, all abandoning him. The IRS froze his accounts that same day. By the end of the week, he'd lost everything. The business, the reputation, the money. Simone. She was engaged to someone else within 2 months. Turns out she loved Brandon's money more than she loved Brandon. He came to the house one last time, begging me to help him, to lie for him, to say the signatures were mine. He actually cried, said I'd ruined his life. I looked at this man who'd thrown papers at my feet and mocked me with his mistress on speaker, and I said, "No, Brandon, you ruined your own life. You just didn't think I was smart enough to prove it. You underestimated me. That was your mistake." Then I closed the door in his face. The divorce was final within 3 months. I got the house. I got primary custody of Nina. I got most of the legitimate assets that weren't seized by the government. Brandon got supervised visitation when he wasn't in court, and eventually a federal sentence. 10 years. He'll be in prison until Nina graduates high school. He lost everything. His business, his freedom, his reputation. Last I heard, he's in a minimum security facility somewhere upstate. Simone's married to a dentist now. She doesn't take his calls. As for me, I went back to school and got certified as a forensic accountant. Turns out there's a huge need for someone who can untangle financial fraud in divorces. I started consulting for other women going through what I went through. Women whose husbands thought they were too stupid to understand money. I helped them see the patterns, gather the evidence, build the case. My business is thriving. I make more money now than Brandon and I ever had together, and it's all mine. Nina's doing great. She's smart, confident, and growing up watching her mother stand on her own 2 feet. She doesn't remember much about the divorce, just that Daddy had to go away for a while because he made bad choices. That's enough for her to know. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to Brandon, if I think I went too far. And honestly, not even a little bit. He didn't just cheat on me. He didn't just disrespect me. He built a criminal empire on my work, my signature, my reputation, and then tried to throw me away like garbage. He would have let me take the fall if it meant saving himself. He mocked me at my lowest point. He underestimated me because I was his wife, because I'd sacrificed my career for him, because he thought love made me weak. But love didn't make me weak. It made me patient. It made me thorough. And when the time came, it made me ruthless. You want to know the sweetest part of this whole thing? Brandon thought he made me. He thought I was nothing without him. But the truth is, he was nothing without me. I was the one keeping his books straight, managing his accounts, making sure the business ran smoothly. When I left, the whole thing collapsed like the fraud it always was. He wasn't a brilliant developer. He was a con man with a good accountant. And when he lost the accountant, he lost everything. I'm not the same woman who cried in her kitchen 3 years ago. That woman was scared, hurt, and doubting herself. The woman I am now, she knows exactly what she's worth. She doesn't need anyone to validate her. She built a whole life from the ground up, and she did it on her own terms. Brandon didn't break me, he woke me up. And for that, in some twisted way, I should probably thank him. But I won't, because he doesn't deserve my gratitude. He doesn't deserve anything from me. And that's how a so-called helpless housewife took down a man who thought he was untouchable. Listen, if you're in a situation where someone's trying to control you, diminish you, or take what's yours, document everything. Know your worth. Build your escape plan. You're stronger than you think. If this story fired you up, smash that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe for more stories of people who refuse to stay down. Drop a comment telling me what you would have done in Vanessa's position. Remember, the best revenge is becoming the person they said you'd never be. I'll see you in the next one.